Welcome to the SEO.co Search Engine Optimization Podcast. Digital marketing essentials and next-level tactics. From off-site and on-site optimization to persuasive selling and everything in between. You'll learn actionable tips on what it takes to outright and outrank your competition.
Mobile optimization. Mobile optimization is a broad category that includes both technical and non-technical elements. Mobile searches now outnumber desktop searches, so Google has taken extensive efforts in recent years to reward sites that optimize for mobile devices and penalize sites that don't. Put simply, if your site is friendly to mobile devices, capable of loading and presenting content in a way that works well for mobile users, you're going to see an increase in authority and rankings. Incidentally, you'll also become more appealing to your target demographics, possibly increasing customer loyalty and/or conversions. So what is it that makes sites optimized for mobile devices? There are a few main criteria. Content visibility. First, you'll need to make sure that all your site's content is visible to a user, without the need to scroll or zoom. On a non-optimized website, the written text will often bleed to the right, forcing users to scroll to read the rest of it. On a mobile-optimized site, that text would be constrained by the edges of the screen. Content readability. Your content should also be readable. Oftentimes, that means choosing a bigger, cleaner font. Mobile devices have smaller screens, so you don't want your visitors to squint or zoom to have to read it. Finger-friendly interactions. Instead of using a mouse with a fairly precise pointer to engage with your site, users are going to be using their fingers to tap buttons and fill out forms. Accordingly, your buttons, tabs, and menus should grow to be more prominent and tappable. Image and video visibility. There are some types of content that simply don't load on mobile devices. Obviously, you'll want your visitors to see all your cool images and videos, so mobile optimization demands that those features are visible on mobile devices. Loading speed. Remember what I talked about in the site speed section? It matters even more for mobile devices. Generally, mobile devices load sites much slower than desktop devices, so a fraction of a second delay on a desktop device could cost you multiple seconds on a mobile device. Fortunately, mobile speed improvements are mostly the same as desktop speed improvements. If all this sounds complex to you, don't worry. There are some simple ways to test your site to see if it's counted as mobile-friendly, and simple fixes you can make if it's not. The easiest way to make your site mobile-friendly is to make your site responsive. This means that your site will detect what device is attempting to view it, and automatically adjust based on those parameters. This way, you can keep managing only one site, and have it work for both mobile and desktop devices simultaneously. You can also create a separate mobile version of your site, but this isn't recommended, especially now that Google is beginning to switch to mobile-first indexing. How can you make your site responsive? The easiest way is to use a website builder and choose a responsive template. Most mainstream website builders these days have responsive templates by default, so you'll be hard-pressed to find one that doesn't offer what you need. If you're building a site from scratch, you'll need to work with your designers and developers to ensure they're using responsive criteria. As long as your site is responsive, you should be in good shape. If you're in doubt, you can use Google's mobile-friendly tool to evaluate your domain and see if there are any mistakes interfering with your mobile optimization. All you have to do is enter your domain, and Google will tell you if any of your pages are not up to snuff, pinpointing problem areas so you can correct them if necessary. Sitemaps. I've mentioned the importance of sitemaps in multiple areas of this guide so far. Now I'm going to get into the technical details of what sitemaps are, why they're important for your site, and how to create them. There are actually two different types of sitemaps you can build and use for your site: HTML and XML. I'll start with HTML sitemaps, since they're a little easier to create and understand. As I mentioned before, HTML sitemaps exist as a page on your site, visible to both human visitors and search engine crawlers. Here, you'll list a hierarchy of all the pages on your site, starting with the main pages, and splitting down into categories and subcategories. Ideally, you'll include the name of the page along with the accurate link to it, and every page on your site will link to your HTML sitemap in the footer. Google won't be using an HTML sitemap to index your pages, so it's not explicitly necessary to have one. However, it does give Google search crawlers a readily available guidebook of how your pages relate to one another. It can also be useful for your visitors, giving them an overall vision of your site. XML sitemaps are far more important. Rather than existing as a page on your site, XML sitemaps are code-based files that you can feed to Google directly in Google Search Console. They look a little like this. As you can imagine, they're a nightmare to produce manually, but there are lots of free and paid tools you can use to generate one. Before I explain XML sitemap generation, you need to know what they're used for. Again, these aren't going to determine whether or not Google indexes your site. Google is going to crawl your site anyway. Instead, uploading your XML sitemap to Google will instruct Google which pages you find most valuable on your site, and how those pages relate to one another. For example, you could exclude technical pages of your site that contain fewer than 200 words, so the overall perceived quality of your site isn't dragged down by your worst content. Google explains that XML sitemaps are especially useful for the following types of sites: large sites, with thousands of pages. Sites with archived, poorly linked content, makes it difficult for Google to understand how all your pages link to one another. New sites, which have few external links pointing to them. Sites use specific types of rich media, such as special annotations or visual media. Note that excluding a page from your XML sitemap doesn't mean that page won't be indexed. The only way to fully block indexation altogether is to use your robots.txt file. Does this all sound too complex? Don't worry. The actual process you use to create a sitemap is fairly simple. Most CMSs have built-in features that allow you to automatically generate both HTML and XML sitemaps. For example, Yoast's SEO plugin gives you the ability to create dynamic sitemaps, which automatically update as you make changes to your site. For example, you could exclude pages of your site that fall short of a given word count threshold, and if you add content, they'll automatically begin to reappear. It's helpful to know how sitemaps work and why they're important, but for your own sanity, it's best to leave their generation in the hands of automated apps. Metadata and alt text. What I'm going to refer to as metadata is a blanket category that includes page titles, meta descriptions, and alt text. These are sections of text that describe your pages. They exist in the code of your site, and are visible to Google search crawlers, but aren't always visible to visitors. Google's crawlers review this information and use it to categorize certain features of your site, including pages and pieces of content within that page. This makes it helpful for optimizing your site for specific keywords and phrases. It's also used to produce the entries in search engine results pages that users will come across. Accordingly, it's important to optimize your metadata to ensure that prospective visitors are encouraged to click through to your site. The title of your page will appear first, followed by your page URL in green, followed by your meta description, as shown in the example below. Your goal in optimizing the meta information of your site then is to first ensure that Google is getting an accurate description of your content, and second to entice users to click through to your site. Titles. Titles are the first and most important descriptions of your site's individual pages. They should include at least one keyword relevant to that page, your brand name at the end, and should make some logical sense to your visitors. They should also contain less than 60 characters, as this is the maximum displayed by SERPs. For blog articles, titles usually correspond with the title of that blog post. Descriptions. Descriptions are secondary ways of describing your pages, and generally have more wiggle room to include secondary keywords, long tail phrases, and more conversational phrasing. The limit here is 160 characters. Alt text. Alt text is specific to images and is important for both search engines and visitors. When uploading an image, you'll need to make sure your image file name reflects what the image actually contains. This will function as the image's title in search engines. You may also include a caption to correspond with that image. Beyond that, you'll need some descriptive text, which helps Google understand What's happening in your image? This is the alt text, and it's usually editable directly within your CMS. The alt text will also appear, instead of the image, in any case where a user attempts to load the image but is unable. Thankfully, optimizing your metadata is fairly simple. Most CMS platforms will, for each page of your site, offer blank, clearly labeled boxes that let you edit the corresponding metadata for that page. Remember, it's a good idea to include at least one keyword in each of your titles and descriptions, but you'll want to avoid keyword stuffing, and focus on writing metadata that makes sense to your users. Technical errors. The last component of technical SEO I want to cover is the possibility for technical errors. These are common things that can go wrong with your site, causing a hiccup in your rankings and interfering with your plans. If you notice your site isn't ranking the way it should, or if something has dramatically changed without your notice, your first troubleshooting step should be checking for the following technical errors.
Thank you for joining us on the SEO.co podcast. We appreciate your time. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit SEO.co for more resources based on today's topic, as well as access to more podcast episodes to help you improve your site's long-term SEO success.